Right, as I mentioned at the top of the show, devastating scenes in Afghanistan after the Taliban overwhelmed the city. It's reminiscent of the fall of Saigon in 1975. I want to bring in someone Afghan-born who understands this very well. She's an Australian now, Mina Zaki. She's an international relations and cybersecurity expert. She speaks 5 languages. She joins me now from Sydney. Mina, I really appreciate your first-hand experience here. You're incredibly concerned, as you should be, about the tragedy unfolding in Afghanistan. Just talk us through that.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. It is a tragedy for Afghanistan, but what we have to understand and realise is that the implications of this will be very, very far-reaching. I'm not too sure whether you've seen the scenes, but the Afghan flag has officially been removed from Kabul, and a white flag, very reminiscent of the ISIS flag, has been put up. The only difference is that it's white instead of being black. This organisation that we're talking about, they are no longer a ragtag team that are led by a one-eyed sage. This is a very calculated, very well-developed organisation who have been waiting and watching and planning this for a very long time. Now, last night I watched in horror as their spokesperson contacted BBC journalist Yalda Hakim and kind of spoke through what their plans are for the city. It was quite astonishing to hear him speak. This was a man that had been clearly trained to speak to media. His answers were always pivots. He said all of the right things that we wanted to hear. And it's just not a reflection of what's going on in Kabul right now. For example, he acted as though, everything's business as usual, women are allowed to go to school, and yet 60% of female attendance in the universities in Herat, when they went to school that day or to university, they were turned back and they were told to go and send their male relatives. And what you have to understand as well is that these numbers of Taliban that have just simply walked into Afghanistan, they weren't sitting around in Afghanistan. They were being incubated in Pakistan next door. The office that the Taliban has set up in Doha was set up 15 years ago. And 15 years ago, they started planning this. So we have to understand that this is not just a ragtag team that has, come in and set up camp in Afghanistan. This is a calculated, very well planned and very well funded organisation that is going to have major implications right across the globe.
Yes, so you're right to point out they are sophisticated. They've had 20 years to train and prepare. They've been sponsored by states like Pakistan. They'll be the legitimate face of Islamic fundamentalism and terror, to be honest. We've heard today, Mina, that 5,000 prisoners, Islamic State prisoners, Al-Qaeda prisoners, they've all broken out of their jails. They're in the Taliban hands. They're hardened criminals, as we know. Taliban is trained. It has all the weaponry that the Afghan army has upped and walked away from, American-funded and American-supported weaponry. This will be, I believe, the terror threat for our generation and a training ground, a safe haven for terrorists.
100%, Peter. And what we have to realise is that those prisoners didn't just escape, they were actually released. Any legitimate government that wants to do something that's right for a country would not just release prisoners, 5,000 prisoners. On top of that, Peter, they don't just have access to, guns and artillery. They have access to very sophisticated airplanes and things like that. So they've essentially been gifted these very advanced defence vehicles by Joseph Biden. I will be the very first person to say that this is just an absolute debacle. And whilst Mr. Biden is off at Camp David, Afghanistan is being torn apart. And the other point that I'd like to make, Peter, is we can't just whilst Pakistan has to be held accountable for incubating the Taliban, they're not the only ones to blame. We have to look at where this funding is coming from. And I would like to point to the fact that China is or has been one of the first countries to recognize the Taliban as the new government of Afghanistan should they come in. I mean, that should is it's a joke, really.
Yeah, it's terrible.
And on top of
it's terrible.
Yeah, the investment that China has made in Afghanistan and what it stands to gain is just, it's insane. And let's not forget that one of our most strategic partners, one of Australia's most strategic partners, India, is at great risk right now. And if India falls, we are in trouble.
I've got to leave it there, Mina, but I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Peter.
Mina Zaki, she's an intelligence cybersecurity expert. She grew up in Afghanistan. She's obviously very much in Australia now. Appreciate her time.